Okay, so we're finally to the chapter where we're going to start talking about CSS, Cascading Style Sheets. First thing I'm going to do is define a new site because I have a new set of files to work with for this chapter. I've copied the folder 08_CSS to my desktop from the exercise files folder, so if you have the files you can work along with me. And again, this is just a version of that same tcloud site that we're going to be working with. So I'm just going to go ahead and define that. Let's go to Site, New Site. I'll call this one CSS, and we'll browse for the folder out on my desktop, select it. Again, if you're on the Mac, you'd select it and click Choose. Here on Windows, we double-click and then click Select. I'm going to leave everything else the way it is and click on OK. Okay, so here are the files that I'm going to be working with. Now, before we get into this, I'm going to apologize for getting into lecture mode here, but there is just some important background information that I want to make sure I get out there, just so you can follow along and understand where we're going with the rest of this chapter. So let's talk about what CSS is first, and let's break down that phrase, cascading style sheets. The style in CSS refers to what CSS does. Cascading style sheets define the style or appearance of text, paragraphs, images, tables, and any other web elements you can think of. Cascading style sheets are most commonly used to control the appearance of text, but there are other uses that I'll be touching on as we go through here. The sheets in cascading style sheets simply means that these styles are lines of code in their own individual files, or sheets, sitting on your web server somewhere. Now, style sheets can also exist internally on web pages, but they're more commonly found as external files. External style sheets are more useful when you want styles to define the appearance of your entire site, or at least several pages of your site. Sheets, plural, implies that you can have more than one style sheet in your site. You can have a web page whose styles are defined both by internal and external style sheets. That's where the term cascading comes in. For instance, you might have a page where the size of the text is defined by an internal style sheet, while the color of the text is defined by an external style sheet. These two style sheets cascade over each other and simultaneously define different aspects of the text's appearance. Now, if for some reason the two styles conflict with each other, like if the internal style sheet says the text should be red, but the external style sheet says it should be blue, the internal style sheet always takes precedence. We're going to see this over and over again. The more specific the style is, the more it's going to take over from the general rules. So cascading style sheets are just descriptions of how text and other page elements should appear and behave. As we work through the next several movies, keep in mind that cascading style sheets are compatible with 4.0 versions of browsers and above. These days, that's probably not as much an issue as it used to be because many people have browsers that are more current than 4.0 browsers. But just be aware that people who are surfing the web with older browsers for some reason won't be able to see your pages formatted with CSS. And when I refer to 4.0 browsers, the 4.0 usually refers to Internet Explorer and Netscape. Internet Explorer, I believe, is in its 6th version right now. But new browsers like Firefox and Apple Safari are still in their 1.0 versions, but they do comply with and can understand cascading style sheet styles. So why would you want to use style sheets? Well, first of all, they allow you to control the appearance of all the pages on your site very quickly. If all the pages in your site reference the same external style sheet, all you have to do is change that one style sheet to change all of your pages. Another advantage of style sheets is that they give you the ability to display text and other elements in ways that just aren't possible in plain HTML. For instance, in CSS you can define leading, which is the space between lines of text. That's something you can't do with regular HTML. Another advantage of style sheets is they tend to require less code than HTML, so pages styled with CSS tend to load a lot faster. And of course, as I mentioned in the typography chapter, the old HTML font tag has been deprecated, so if you want to keep up with the preferred standard of text formatting, you need to learn and use cascading style sheets. So that's the basic gist of CSS for now. Let's get into it and learn more as we go along. Now, I'm not going to be able to cover every single thing that CSS is capable of in this title. This is a Dreamweaver title after all and not purely CSS training. But I'm going to try to give you some very common uses for CSS that you'll be able to put to use right away in your own sites. Now, before we start working with CSS, there's one more quick thing we need to take care of. If you recall, back in the section on document basics, I was showing you page properties, and I told you that by default, Dreamweaver is set up to style pages with cascading style sheets instead of the deprecated HTML styles. And we actually turned that preference off so I could show you the old way of doing these things, and so you could learn how to do that in case you ever had to work with an older website. Now, before we start working with CSS, we need to go back in and turn that preference back on. So I'm going to go to Edit Preferences. Again, if you're on a Mac, that'll be Dreamweaver Preferences. And under the General category, make sure you check Use CSS instead of HTML tags. So we want Dreamweaver to write CSS for us now. Previously, we turned it off because we wanted regular HTML tags. So that's very important. Make sure you check that box before you move on if you're following along with the rest of these exercises. So I'll click OK, and now we're ready to go. Okay, so let's talk about creating some styles for this site. Now, the site we defined in the first movie is a version of the T-Cloud site that's had all of its cascading style sheet formatting removed. So I can walk you through the process of creating your own cascading style sheets. I'm going to work with the file that's inside the About T folder, and it's the index file in that folder. So here we have a page with several different elements on it. We have our image-based navigation at the top, some text links, some headings, an image, there's a horizontal divider here and there, and some more text links down there at the bottom. But none of the text on this page has been formatted in any way, except for these headings up here. Everything else is in the default font, size, and color. Now, if I click my cursor in this top heading, you can see down here in the Properties Inspector that it's been formatted with a heading 1. And this one down here has been formatted as a heading 2. You can see down here as well. And so has this heading down here. If I click in there, you can see it has a heading 2 format on it. And you should recall those paragraph formats we talked about in the typography chapter. So I'd like to add some styles. I want to create a style sheet to dress this page up a little bit, to make it a little bit more interesting and to control the appearance of text on this page without having to resort to using the HTML font tag. Now, I mentioned at the beginning of this chapter that you can have both internal and external style sheets. When you're looking to globally control the appearance of your site, you're going to create an external style sheet, meaning you'll create a sheet that exists as its own separate document in your site. And we'll be getting to that, but for this example, I'm going to be creating an internal style sheet, which means the styles I create here will only affect this one page we're looking at right now and aren't going to have any effect on any other page in my site. So to start working on a style sheet, I'm going to make sure that my CSS panel group is toggled open, which it is. Now, the CSS panel group has been revised greatly for Dreamweaver 8, and I think you're really going to like how easy it is to use. At the top here, we have All and Current. This allows us to see all of the style sheets in our site, and this allows us to see our current style sheets. Now, I have no style sheets whatsoever, so these are currently both empty. So to create a new style, I'm going to come down to the bottom of the panel and click the New CSS Rule button right here. The first thing I need to do here is determine what kind of style I want to create. I have the choice of class, which is similar to the way word processor styles function, where you can generate a style and apply it to selected text. I can choose tag, which lets me redefine existing HTML tags to change their default appearance, and I can choose advanced, also known as an ID style. Now, this is a style you're probably not going to use too often because this style type is used if the style properties for an element have to be completely distinct from all the other elements on the page. And this kind of style can only be applied once throughout the entire document. So it's kind of limited in its ability. And after we get through this chapter, you're probably going to find that the class style is going to be the most flexible and useful of these three types, because class styles can be applied to single elements as well as multiple elements. But in this movie, we're going to show you how to create a tag style, which means, as you can read here, it redefines the look of a specific HTML tag. So as I mentioned earlier, on this page we have some text that's been formatted with a heading 1 and a heading 2. Let me just cancel this for a moment so we can look at the XHTML code. Let me switch over to code view. So I just got to hunt around for those tags. Around here someplace. There we go. So you can see here that the H1 and H2 tags surround this text. By default, most browsers, when you apply heading tags to text, make the text appearance a little bit bigger and bolder, which is fine, but if you want it to look a little bit different or even a lot different, what you can do is tell the browser to display anything that's formatted with an H1 a certain way and anything that's been formatted with an H2 another way. So anytime the browser sees these tags, we're going to tell it to display the text within those tags a certain way. You're essentially going to be redefining these tags. And for people who are using older browsers that can't understand CSS, and we're talking about people, again, who are using pre-4.0 browsers, so they're getting to be a pretty small group, they'll just see the regular default appearance of your settings. They'll still be able to read the text, it just won't be dressed up like you intend it to. But for the majority of people who do have more current browsers, your styled headings are going to appear just as you intended. So let's go back to the design view. And I'm going to click the new CSS rule button again to create a style. And in here I'm going to choose tag to redefine an HTML tag. And here I can either enter the tag that I want to change, but notice because my cursor was flashing in that H1 formatted text, the H1 tag already appears in here. If it didn't appear in here, I could type it in, or I could select it from this menu of commonly used HTML tags. Next, I have to let Dreamweaver know whether I want to create a new external style sheet to share with other pages with the new style sheet file selection here, or if the style I'm creating is just for applying to my current page as an internal style sheet. So I'm going to make sure this document only is checked right now because I'm creating an internal style sheet. And I'll click on OK. So here in the CSS rule definition window that appears, I can choose from all sorts of categories to affect the appearance and behavior of the H1 tag that I've decided to redefine. Now you're probably going to be spending the majority of your time in the type category where you can adjust the appearance of text. As you get more advanced, you'll start going into some of these other CSS categories. But for now, we're going to concentrate on type. Here in the type category, I can define a font face, a size, a style, a weight, and several other attributes for the H1 tag. Now, as an example, earlier on I mentioned that one of the issues facing web designers is that text tends to appear at a larger size on Windows machines than it does on Macs. Well, that's an issue that you can fix with CSS. The trick is to use pixel sizes to size your text, which is the default option next to the size field here. You can see it's currently grayed out, but as soon as I type something in here, notice it says pixels. And you can choose from some other font sizes here, but again, if you want to make sure that it's a consistent size across platforms, make sure you keep pixels selected. When you do so, you're essentially locking in the pixel size, and you'll find that your text looks the same on both the Mac and Windows platforms. So I've applied a setting here of 20 pixels. To see what this looks like right away without leaving this dialog box, I can click Apply. You can see right away, any text on my page that's been formatted with the H1 tag reflects the change my new style definition. Actually, looking at it now, 20 pixels seems a little small to me for the main heading, so I'm going to try 22 and click Apply again. All right, I can live with that. Now, while I'm here, I can also choose a color for the text. I can click the color well to pick a color just like we've seen before. Or again, I can choose for a color from anywhere on my screen. And let's see. And again, this color well is just like the previous ones. You can choose your Mac OS color cubes, Windows, or just the regular color cubes here. I'm going to choose this color here, CC6666. And let's see, so I've set the size, I've set the color. That's good enough for now. I'm going to click on OK. So there's my redefined H1 tag. And you can see that it's now a little bit bigger and it's changed its color. Now, if I highlight that and go look at the source code, I have to find it in here, there it is. You'll notice that nothing has been added to the H1 tag. It still says H1 for the opening tag and H1 for the closing tag. But if I scroll up a little, I'll find this line right here, or these lines. It basically says that anytime the H1 tag appears in this document, apply this size and this color to it. So it only has to be written once in the code, this size description and the color description. And after that, anything on the page that you apply the H1 style to will take on that appearance. So let me do another one for you. Let me go back to the design view. Now these other headings are formatted with H2. So with my cursor in there, I'm going to come back to my CSS styles panel, click on the new CSS rule again. Again, I'm going to redefine a tag, and since my cursor was in there, it now says H2. And again, I'm going to create this style just for this particular document. Click on OK. And for this one, let's see, I'll do a size of 18 pixels. And let's pick a color. I'm going to sample this dark color from the bottom of this image right here. And we'll click on OK. And there's the change. And notice if I scroll down, this heading has also been reformatted because it was also formatted with an H2 tag. Now, new to Dreamweaver 8, you can now view and edit your style's properties directly from the CSS panel without having to edit it in the main editor. Now, in here, you can choose from current or all. The current style that I'm currently looking at with my cursor in here tells me it's a font size of 18 pixels, and that's the color. If I move my cursor into the H1 style, I can see that current style. If I click all, I can see all the styles in this particular document. So if I wanted to edit or add to the H2 style, I could just select it, and I can see its properties down here. By default, you're shown only the properties the style currently has down here, which you can click and edit if you wanted to. So if I decided that this font size was still a little too big, I could come in here and change this to 16. You can see it's changed right away. You can also add additional properties by clicking Add Property, and then when you click the menu, you can choose from all these different categories. So if I wanted to choose a font family, I could select that, and then over here, it gives me my font list, just like we saw when we were working with type. So maybe I want to make this for Dana. And there it is. Now these two other buttons here to the left of this default button here that shows only the set properties, the first one here allows you to see all the other available types of styles. Let me bring this up a little bit so you can see it a little bit better. So these are all the available types of styles if I click the A to Z button. So it's the A to Z of styles there. Or we can click this other button that puts the styles into categories. So you can see font size, font family, and then I can just choose from categories, background, block, border, all the different categories that we saw in the main editor. Now, of course, if you don't like working in this view, and it is a little bit cramped as you start to add more styles, you can just simply double-click on the style to go back to the main editor here, and you can just pick categories over here and work in the larger main editor. So the advantage of styling existing HTML tags is that you can quickly format several different sections of your page just by creating one style for an existing HTML tag. But that can also be a downside too, because maybe you don't want every H2 tag to look like this or every H1 tag to look like this. But you really don't have a choice, because when you redefine an HTML tag, each instance of that tag is affected. So in the next movie, we'll take a look at how to create a class style, which is more flexible than a redefined tag style, because class styles can be applied to multiple kinds of content and only to the content that you select. So you can be much more selective about which elements get formatted with class styles. So let's take a look at that next. Now let's take a look at class styles. As I mentioned in the previous movie, class styles allow you to be a little bit more selective about which text or element on your page you want to format. Now, if I wanted to give the main text on this page a uniform look, I could create a style based on the HTML body tag, but that would affect all the text on my page no matter where it was. And I find that if there's a possibility that I may want to format other text differently, I'll prefer to create a class style instead of redefining an HTML tag. So what we're going to do is, just like we did before, we're going to come over here and click on the New CSS Rule button. And this time we're going to choose to create a class style. Next we have to give it a name. Notice I don't have that list of HTML tags anymore. It still says H2 in here, but I shouldn't name a class style H2 after an HTML tag. I should give it a more distinctive, descriptive name. Now you can give your class styles any name you want, as long as the name doesn't begin with a number or a dash, and there shouldn't be any spaces in it. But you should at least give it a good descriptive name that tells you what this style does and what type of element it's intended to format. Now, normally you're supposed to put a dot in front of the name. That's how class styles are named, with a dot at the beginning. So this might be dot main text for the main text of my page. Now, if you don't put the dot there, Dreamweaver will automatically place a dot there for you, but I've just gotten into the habit of typing it myself. So I'm going to call this dot main text, since it's going to be the style for all the regular text on my page. Again, I'm going to make sure this is just for this document only. We're going to add this to the internal style sheet, and I'll click on OK. And now I can make sure I'm in type properties, and I can decide what I want this style to look like. So for my main text, I'm going to choose 10 pixels, and I'm going to set a line height of 12 pixels. Line height refers to the vertical measurement of each line of text, and by choosing a height larger than the font size, I can make sure there's a decent amount of space between the lines and that they don't get too close together and make it difficult to read. I'm also going to make my main text display in the Verdana font set. And when I was originally putting the site together, I decided on a color for my main text, and I wrote down the hexadecimal value, and the color I chose was 484B3A. So if I tab away from there, you'll see the color appear right in there, sort of a very dark color. Okay, so that's how I want my text to look. Notice that unlike when I was creating my markup styles, even if I click Apply, nothing happens here. The style does now appear in my CSS panel, but nothing has changed on my page, even if I click on OK to come back to the page. That's because when you create a class style, you have to specify which elements you want to apply the style to. So I have a couple options for applying the style that I just created. Now in each case, to apply the style, I'm going to select it from the style menu down here. Notice that main text has been added to this menu, and conveniently it appears in that particular style, so you can remind yourself of what that style looks like without applying it. But how I select the text is going to make a difference in how the style is applied in the code. Now if I just want a range of text to be styled, like these couple of words here, I could just select those, choose main text, and the style is applied there. I'm going to undo that with Control-Z, it's Command-Z on the Mac. If I want to style an entire paragraph, all I have to do is make sure my cursor is somewhere in that paragraph when I select the style. Like so. And if I look at the code, you can see the paragraph tag up here now has an attribute of class equals main text. And if I scroll up to the top, where those styles are, right here, you can see a dot main text, and here's the description of that style. So it's basically saying here, anytime a class is defined as main text, in the body of the page, use these attributes for it, which is what's going on right here. Let me undo that again. And again, because my text is inside of a table cell, and we'll be getting into tables in the very next chapter, I can apply the style to the entire cell. With my cursor in the cell, I can look down here in the tag selector area, which shows me all the tags leading up to where my cursor currently is right now. And I can click on the TD tag to select the entire cell holding all this text. TD stands for table data, and it represents the cell that my cursor is in. Now, mostly it's up to you to determine which way you want to apply your styles. In this case, I like applying it to the table cell because it only takes a couple of clicks. As long as my cursor is in here, I just have to click TD, and then I select my style, and everything in here now takes on that style. I don't have to worry about clicking my cursor in each paragraph and applying the style that way. Now, notice that applying the styles didn't change my heading styles very much, even though they're in the same cell as the main text. That's because the general rule in web design is the specific overrides the general. The general rule in this case was for all the content of this table cell to look like my main text style. But there's another style specifically saying the text mark with H1 and H2 should look these particular ways. Now, if you're particularly eagle-eyed, you might have noticed that the font for H1 has now become Verdana. That's because when I created my H1 style and redefined, I did not specify a font face. So with an unspecified font face, the main text took over or cascaded over that original style, and it applied Verdana to that text. Now, if I had specified a particular font, it would not have changed to Verdana. Similarly, this H1 tag kept its reddish color because I specified a color when I created that particular redefinition, even though the main text has that dark color to it. So you can see how the things that are specifically applied to the H1 tag remain applied, but things that I don't specify, like the font face, are taken over by the style that's cascading over it. Now, as I mentioned in the previous movie, redefining HTML tags is useful, but sometimes you might find it a little bit too restricting. Again, for instance, you might have the H1 tag applied to several different sections of your page, but you only want to change one of those H1 tags. So in those cases, you probably just want to create class styles for each of those headings that you want to format. So what I'm going to do is come up here, select H1, and I'm going to click this trash icon down here to delete that rule. Notice that H1 is now gone from my list of styles, and now it's being styled by the main text style sheet. It still is an H1 though, so it's keeping those properties, but now it's taken on all the other properties of my main text style. I'm going to do the same with H2. Delete those styles. So now I'm going to create class styles for these sections. So I'm going to quickly come through here, create a new style. Now, looking at this, I can see the section that we're in is About T, and the particular page within the section is History. So this is sort of the section and the subsection. And then we have sort of a subheading down here. So I'm going to create 3 class styles for these 3 different sections. So first I'm going to create a class style called Section. And again, just for this document only, click on OK. And for this one, we'll make it 18 pixels. We won't change the line height this time. Let's keep that serif font that we were using. I kind of like serif font, so we'll use Georgia for this one. And for the color, I selected 737A51. So I'll hit apply. It appears over here, but again, because I created a class style, we're not going to see any change over here until I actually apply it to my selected text. So I'll click on OK. I'm going to create another one. We'll call this one dot subsection. And for this one, we'll put a size of 18 pixels again. Again, we'll make it Georgia. Let's make this bold. For the weight, we'll make it bold. And for the color, we'll go 664322. And I'll just tab out of there to see the color. Okay, and I'll click on OK. And now I have my subsection style listed in here. Let me do one more. We'll call this one dot subhead. And again, this is mostly a matter of personal preference, but I really just prefer using class styles over HTML styles. So for color, we'll go 664322 again. And let's see, we'll do a size of 14 pixels. Again, we'll make the font Georgia. And we'll make it bold. And OK. All right, so there are 3 styles. So what I'm going to do to apply these is just select the text. This is going to be the main section that we're in. So notice that these have all been added to my style menu here. So there's section. This one is subsection. And actually, this the way Dreamweaver is displaying this table is sort of getting in my way right now. So I'm going to come up here and choose to hide the table widths. There we go. Now I can see it a little bit better. All right, and this one is going to be the subhead. So those are the 3 styles that I just created. And this one is also going to be a subhead. And there we go. So that's looking a little bit better to me. Now the only bit of text I haven't formatted with a style yet is this sub-navigation area up here. I can't leave it looking like this because it doesn't really fit in the navigation area that's been set up. So let me create a style for this really quick. We'll call this one dot sub nav. And this one will be 10 pixels, Georgia, bold. And let's see. We'll add a line height of 7 to make sure that it's not flush against the top of that area there. And for a color, again, we'll choose 664322. Click on OK. Come in here and apply sub nav to this. There we go. So that's looking a little bit better. Now, the one last thing I want to do with this sub nav area is I want to visually show that it's actually part of the main navigation, and it doesn't really look great flush all the way to the left here. Another advantage of using CSS is that you can specify things like padding, which describes how far from the border an element is going to appear. So let me come back in here, double click on subnav, and I'm going to come into the box area, and we'll get more into this a little bit later. But I'm going to add some padding, and I don't want it to be same for all. I just want to add padding to the left. Now I have to figure out how much padding I want to add here in terms of pixels. If I look at the ruler up here, I want to try to line it up right to the right of the About Us button right here. So it's just past 100 pixels right there. But my problem here is the border of this table is right here, right about at the 25 pixel mark. Let me cancel that first. What I can do is click right here at the intersection of the horizontal and vertical rulers, click and drag out. You notice it allows me to drag the ruler out. So I'm just going to line this up to the border of the table. That puts the 0 right here. And now I can see that this takes me to right about the 70 pixel mark or so. So what I can do now is go back and edit that subnav. And back inside the box area, we'll set up a left pad of Let's try 75 pixels. As soon as I hit apply, you can see it gets moved over. It's not quite in line yet. Let's try 78 pixels. Okay, slightly indented. I can live with that. Let's click on OK. Whew, let's take a quick look at this in our browser. And here we are with all of our styles. All right, so that's how you set up class styles. Now in the next movie, we'll continue looking at some other things that you can do with styles. Okay, let's continue creating styles for this page. The next task I want to tackle is the appearance of the links on my page. First of all, the links on my page are all blue and underlined. That's the default appearance of links. But blue probably doesn't really work with the rest of the color scheme on this page. Now, if you think back to the chapter on document basics, I showed you the page properties window where you could apply a background image or choose a background color, as well as colors for default text and for links, visited links, and active links. Well, everything I showed you there was with Dreamweaver's preferences set to use HTML tags instead of CSS. But now that we've turned on the CSS preferences, let's see what page properties looks like. I'm going to go to Modify Page Properties. And again, if you're on the Mac, it's Command-J or Control-J on the PC if you want to use the keyboard command. Otherwise, just Modify Page Properties. And right off the bat, we have more options available to us than we had with the HTML version of Page Properties. Under Categories, I'm going to go to Links. Unlike the regular HTML Page Properties settings, where you can only choose colors for links, visited links, and active links, we have a whole bunch of options here to style our links with CSS. First of all, we can specify a font face for our links if we want it to be different from the default font for the page. I'm not going to choose anything for this, but you can see it's the same list that we saw down in our Properties Inspector when we were working with typography. But I'm going to apply my main text class style that I created in the previous movie to my text links in just a little bit, so I'm not going to bother applying a font here. Next, we can choose size, and again, I'm going to let the main text style apply the size setting as well. All right, next we have 4 color wells to choose from. We've got link color, visited link color, active links, and what's this? Rollover links. With CSS, you can actually create a style that changes the link's color when the user rolls his or her mouse over it. This is a great way to visually indicate that there's a link on your page. And normally this sort of thing is done with images and JavaScript, but here we are doing it with regular old text and CSS. All right, so let's just pick a couple colors here. And let's see, I want to choose a darker color here. Let's go with that for our link color. Actually, I'll choose about the same color for visited link. There's no hard and fast rule saying visited link colors and link colors have to be different. For the active link, again, the active link is a color that it turns into when you actually click down on it. Let's choose white for that. And for the rollover, to indicate that there's actually something going on here, let's pick a darker color like this one. Next, we have our underline style, and this is yet another thing you can do with CSS. You can control the underline that traditionally appears under linked text. The default is to have always underline there, which is what links normally do. But we can also choose to take away that underline by selecting Never Underline. We can choose to show the underline only on the rollover, which means that the underline will not be there until we move our mouse over that link. And we can choose to hide the underline on rollover, meaning that it will be there until we roll over it. I'm going to keep the underline there, but we'll hide it on the rollover so that, again, it'll be a visual indicator that there's something clickable here. So there are my link settings for the link color, visited links, rollover links, and active links. This is a great new feature of Dreamweaver 8. Previously, you had to create special styles for each one of these types of links. You had to create one for the link color, one for the visited links, one of the rollover links, and one for the active links. And you had to set styles for every single one of those. So now in Page Properties, Dreamweaver will do that all for us now that we've made these couple of selections here. We click on OK. And right away, you can see that the links have taken on those styles. If I go to my code, these are the styles that you used to have to create. You didn't have to type them manually, but you did have to create separate styles for each one of these things. But now Dreamweaver actually created them all for us just from the one Page Properties dialog. If I go and preview this in my browser, you can see here, there's my links. I'll roll over them. There's the hover effect. It changes color and that underline disappears. One last thing I'll do here is now I can apply another style to these, which is my main text style that I created previously to make it look like the rest of my page. And there it is. So those are my styled links. So far we've been working with styles that have mostly to do with fonts and type. So in this exercise, I'd like to take a look at some of the other CSS styling options we have available here in Dreamweaver. So let's take a look at this image, for example. Now you'll notice that the surrounding text is coming right up to the edge of this image, because I set this image up to be aligned to the right. And if you recall, way back in the chapter on Document Basics, I showed you how you can align images using this Align menu down here if you want it to the left instead, or we also had these weird options like top, middle, and bottom. So let me move that back to the right. Now, other options that you have available when you have your images selected are V-space and H-space. These settings allow you to add vertical and horizontal padding around the image. So if I wanted to move the text away from the side of the image a bit, I could add some horizontal space of maybe 10 pixels just by typing 10. And if I click off deselect, you can see it's added padding around that image horizontally. The problem with this method is that it adds space on both sides of the image. You can see how it's sort of pulled away from the right side of this table cell here. I wanted this image to stay flush to the side of the table cell, so let me just undo that by selecting it and getting rid of that. So as you've probably guessed, since we're in the CSS chapter, there's a way in CSS to add padding to just one side of an element that's on your page. So I'm going to create a new class style, come up to my CSS styles panel again, create a new CSS rule, and I'm going to create another class, and I'm going to call this one .standard image, img, and I'm going to name this one standard image right, rt. I'm going to create this style to apply just to images that I have aligned to the right side of my pages. I might want to create a similar style later called standard image left so that I'll be able to put padding on the right side of that image. But for this one, I'm just going to call this one standard image right and apply padding to the left side. Okay, so to do this, I'm going to go to the box category. This gives me some options here, including padding and margin. And here under the margin settings, I'm going to uncheck same for all. That way I'm not going to apply this padding around the whole thing. And I'm going to apply maybe 5 pixels of space to the left side. Again, if I wanted to add space around the entire element, I could just click same for all, and you see it fills the whole thing out with 5s. But that's not what I want, so now I have to delete that. And I just want it there on the left. Now you might be wondering what the difference is between margin and padding. Here's a quick explanation. When you're working in CSS, think about each element, whether it's a block of text or an image, think about that element as having a box around it. That's why we're in the box category. Padding is the space inside that box. So if I wanted to add more space inside that imaginary box, I would add padding. But if I want to add space outside that box, I use margins. Now because I'm working with an image in this case, I'm working with margins because that's going to put space on the outside of the image. I can't really put space inside the image at this point. I'm not going to be able to add padding and show you what that effect is. After I set up this image, I'll give you an example of how to use padding. But for this example, I just want to set a 5 pixel margin to the left of the image. Now maybe I also want to add a frame around the image, instead of just having the image there by itself. So I'm going to go to the border category. Now I want to add a border around the entire image, so I'm going to leave all 3 same for all checkboxes selected. So here I can choose a style. What do I want this border to look like? I'm going to choose solid. I can choose a width, thin, thick, medium, or I can put a value in here, and I'm just going to put a single pixel border around it. Actually, to make it easier to see on screen, I'll put a 2 pixel border around it. And for the color, we'll just pick something that'll fit in. Let's go ahead and select the color from right here. Let's see. I'll select the color from here. So there's my style. I'll click on OK. Again, because this is a class style, I'm not going to see any changes until I apply the style manually. So to apply it, I'm going to select the image, come down to my style menu, which is right here. Notice here it's called a class because I'm working with an image. And we're going to choose standard image right. And there it is. So you can see it added some padding to the left-hand side, but it stayed flush to the right side of the cell here, and I have that border around it now. Here in Firefox, you can see it without the table cells. So that's that. Now, let me just quickly show you what I was talking about with the difference between margins and padding. Let me just grab a chunk of text here. I'm going to copy that. And I will just paste that someplace. Let's just add a couple lines here, and I'll just paste it here. Let's say I add that standard image style that I just created to this paragraph. So let me choose standard image. Okay, so now there's a box around this. Let me go and edit that style. I'm going to go back to my box settings, and I'm going to choose to, let me just get rid of the margin on this for the moment. We'll do same for all. I'm going to add a padding of something exaggerated, and I'll put 50 pixels in here and apply that. So if you look in the box here, you can kind of see that, actually I should just hit OK so you can see this whole thing, that inside the box there's 50 pixels of padding inside the box. Notice how far away from the edges the text is. Let me go and edit that again. And this time, get rid of that. I'll put 50 pixels in the margin. And notice that even for this image here and down here, now the text is close to the borders of the box, but it's pulled away from the edges, 50 pixels. So again, margins are on the outside, padding is on the inside of that box. So let me just delete all this. Come back up here, and I need to reset that back the way it was. It's not going to be same for all, so delete, 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 5. Okay, and everything's back to normal. So that's a little bit about working with borders and margins and padding with style sheets. Okay, throughout this chapter, as I've been showing you how to create all these different types of styles, we've been building an internal style sheet to this one document. If I go look at the code, you can see that we've added several styles. These are all the styles that we're looking at right here, starting where it says style, all the way down to the closing style tag down here. So this is all fine if you only have one page to work with, but as I mentioned earlier, the whole point of style sheets, well, the main point of style sheets, is that it lets you control the appearance of all of the pages in your site, or most of the pages in your site, depending on how many pages you attach your style sheet to. So in this movie, I want to show you how to export internal styles and turn them into an external style sheet that you can then apply to another page. You could start from scratch and create an external style sheet simply by coming over to your Styles panel, clicking the New Styles rule, and if you just created a new style, like if I wanted to do an H1 tag, all I have to do is say New Style Sheet File, and when I click on OK, it's going to prompt me to save that. So I'll create an external style sheet file that way. But since I already have defined several styles for this page that I intend to use on the other pages of my site, I'm going to export the current styles into a style sheet. So to do that, I'm going to come up to the File menu and choose Export CSS Styles. It's going to prompt me to save it, and this is very important. You have to save your style sheet somewhere in your local root folder, because all the pages that use this style sheet are going to be constantly referencing it to see how they should display the elements on the page. So again, make sure that you're inside your current site, which I am at this point. And I usually like to create a new folder and just call it Styles. So in case I create other external style sheets, I have them all in one place. So I'm going to go in there and choose Save to save it in there. Whoops, got to give it a name. I'm going to just call this style sheet Main, and it'll automatically add a .css at the end for me for style sheet. This will be my main style sheet. Okay, so if I come over here to my Files panel, I got to hit the refresh button to wake Dreamweaver up, and you can see there is the Styles folder that I just created, and there's the style. So let me go ahead and open up another page. Let's go with fields.html. Here is yet another page that hasn't been formatted with any styles. And you can see up here in the CSS Styles panel, there are no styles in here. So since I've already exported that external style sheet, I can just link this page to that style sheet. I don't have to come in here and just create a whole bunch of internal styles like I did previously. Watch this. There's a little link button here called Attach Style Sheet. Click on that. It's going to ask me to browse for the style sheet, so I'll click Browse. And again, I'm going to look in my local root folder. So I'm inside CSS. There's my styles folder. There's the style that I want. Click on OK. Now it's going to ask me if I want to link to it or import it. I definitely want to link to the style sheet because the whole point again is if I need to make changes later, I can just change the style sheet and all the pages will then follow those changes without me having to open each page individually. If I choose import, it's just going to import those styles and turn it into an internal style sheet independent from the external one. So I'm going to leave link selected here and click on OK. So now you can see in the CSS panels for this page, we have main.css listed as one of our styles. If I click this button next to it, I can see all the styles that are part of that external style sheet. And notice now if I go down to my styles menu here in page properties, in my properties inspector, I can see those styles. So now I can quickly come through here, click TD to select the table cell, choose main text for that, boom, choose the image, set its class to standard image right, boom. And we've got the method, which is, I believe, the subhead, right? We've got about T, which is the section that we're in. From the fields to your cup, which is the subsection. And actually, these should be on separate paragraphs. Let me backspace and hit return. There we go. Oh, and this is our subnav right here. And there it is. So it's that easy to apply these styles. So if I want to do another one, let me just go ahead and save this. Control S or Command S on the Mac will save that. Let's open up this next index page here under About Us. Again, we have another page with no styles on it. One more time, I'll apply that style. Conveniently remembers where the style sheet already is, so I'm just going to keep link selected as before. Click on OK. There are my styles. So again, I can quickly come through here, apply a section, subsection, click the TD tag to select the table data cell, apply main text to that. Oops, forgot to apply main text to the other one. Do that. Subnav will go in here. And there we go. So, let me save that. Now, the advantage here is that if I decide to make a change later on, let's see, let me go in here and say the section style needs to change. I'm going to double click on that and edit it. I'm going to change the color to something obviously different. Let's go with a darker green color, like so. Click on OK. Actually, that wasn't so obviously different. Let's pick a different color. Red. There it is. So notice that it's become red here. Now, if I go back to this fields.html page that I was looking at before, where I also attached the style sheet, notice it has also turned red instantly. Because I changed the main style sheet that was linked to it, it immediately falls into place and sees how it's supposed to display that page. Now, if I go back to the original page where I created this style sheet, notice that this is not changed yet. Now, the reason here is because this style sheet, even though we exported the styles from this page to make our external style sheet, these are still internal styles that are controlling this page. So what I need to do is first get rid of all these internal styles. Trash them, they're all gone. Actually, let me undo that. I'm going to keep those in there, but I'm going to create the link first. And let me show you why. Browse to that. Okay. Now, notice that in here we have the style, which is the internal style, and we have main.css. Now I'm going to delete that entire set of internal styles. Notice right away that the external style sheet takes over. About T has become red, and it didn't switch back to being all unformatted text. That's why I undid that first time I took away that internal style sheet. I wanted to bring in the external one first. That way, when I got rid of the internal one, because all the styles were named the same, they automatically took over. So now I've attached my external style sheet to 3 of my pages. And I could just continue through here, opening each one of these pages, adding that external style sheet, and once all the pages are all linked up, anytime I want to make a change, like change the color of the subsection, for instance, again, something obvious so you can see it, make that blue. They look at the other pages, that's blue, and that's blue as well. So that's how you export an external style sheet and apply it to several other pages, and then you can see you can go in and edit that style sheet, and again, it'll cascade over all the pages that external style sheet has been linked to.